Okay, good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. We are going to start on what used to be referred to as Chapter 24. Many textbooks still refer to it as Chapter 24. It is the section on metabolism that we've just gone through cells. What we need to do now, and we've identified all the structures in the cell. I know it was very exciting. Probably the most important thing that we should take away from the cells is protein synthesis, how we make our proteins, how the cells continue to do that for us, how our DNA works. That's probably the biggest takeaway. Now we're going to see how the cells actually acquire their energy, and that's through the nutrients. You can't hear me.
I can hear you from this end.
Okay, okay, good. Yeah, it's raining today, so Zoom must be acting up. That was sarcasm, sorry. Okay, let me get one more person in here. And okay. So we're going to look at Chapter 24. Chapter 24, the old Chapter 24. Every A&P textbook has a chapter on nutrients, nutrition, and metabolism. Most of the textbooks refer to it as 24 because that's usually where it falls in the course. We put this right after the cells because we think it's important to understand how, if you know how the cells work, you know how the cells have to get energy, and energy is what we're all about. Because later on, we're going to talk about cells and how long they live. You know, we're used to the idea of when the heart stops, life is over. Well, that may be true for the heart, but did you know that the muscle cells in the heart will continue to survive for an hour after death? The same applies to muscle cells. Muscle cells in skeletal muscle can last up to 12 hours after death. The brain shuts down in 5 minutes, but certain cells live longer now, and we need to understand how we keep those cells alive all the time. That's what we're going to be looking at here in nutrition and metabolism. So let's get out of here and go into the lecture. So everybody should see the slide that says Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 24, Nutrition and Metabolism. Let's see if it pops up here like it's supposed to. Let's try this again. Okay, now you should see the whole screen here. Now, so nutrients and nutrition. What's a nutrient? Nutrients are things we take into our body to maintain life. Because when we're living, when our cells are alive, they have to do things. They have to repair themselves. They have to grow. They have to undergo routine maintenance. They make new organelles. They tear apart old organelles. They may get bigger. Skeletal muscle cells don't reproduce, but they do enlarge. The more you work out, the more you exercise, the more protein that you take in, the bigger those cells are going to get. We also, when we have an injury, for example, we repair that injury. We repair a cut or a scratch that occurs. And we have to continue to do this over and over again. Even cells that don't reproduce, like muscle cells, will repair their injuries. Now they won't be able to, they'll lose their ability to contract at the site of the injury, but they will still repair themselves. So we have growth, maintenance, and repair is what we need nutrients for. And that's where all the energy demands come from. So that's why we need nutrients. There are 6 categories. You have 3 major nutrients, and you're going to recognize those as the 3 of the organic molecules. Those are the carbohydrates, the lipids, and the proteins. Those are the major nutrients that we take in on a daily basis. We also take in vitamins and minerals. So whether we take a multivitamin every day or whether we don't, we still get vitamins in our food. And then, of course, water. Our food consists of about 60% water. And since our bodies are between 60 and 70% water, that seems appropriate, considering so that there's water in everything we eat, apples and corn and meat and cheeses, and it all contains lots of water. So we get a great deal of water from our nutrients. We also expel a lot of that water through our feces. Our fecal matter, when we release it, is only about 30% solid. It's about 70% water. It doesn't appear to be that watery, but the range between normal feces and constipation versus diarrhea is just a very few percentages of water. So we have a lot of water movement going on in our bodies anyway. Now this is a chart made by the Department of Agriculture, and they've made variations of this chart over the years, and it's called the food pyramid. And it's supposed to show you how to eat healthy. And now at the bottom of the pyramid, they have the things that we should eat more frequently. The whole grains like whole wheat bread, whole wheat muffins, oat bran, oat cereals, things like that. Because the grain includes the whole grain products. That's what that term means, that it's like the grain kernel, like the kernel of wheat or the kernel of oat with the bran. Bran is the husk that surrounds each individual grain. And when that is processed into food, like in the flour, for example, then we get the husk with it. And that husk is made of cellulose, and we can't process it. So that's where we end up getting our fiber. So the whole grain foods are ideal because of the fiber content. We can't process the fiber. We can't get energy from the fiber, but the fiber helps to move material through our large intestine, waste material. Plus oils, and the oils that the various plant oils, peanut oil or olive oil or corn oil, for example. All these are cooking oils, and it's really a matter of preference. My wife prefers to use olive oil. Other people like, canola oil or sunflower seed oil or safflower seed oil or even peanut oil, or plain old vegetable oil, which is mostly a mixture of corn and some of the other ones there. On a lot of the oils, it may be a preference of taste. It may be a preference of how many unsaturated fats are present in here versus saturated fats. There should be no saturated fats in an oil, but the unsaturated fats, what kind do you have? And the difference in the various cooking oils is minimal. They're all, particularly about the corn and the vegetable oils, other than olive oil. The corn oil, those oils tend to be about the same. Olive oil might be a little bit different. again, a lot of it comes down to flavor, or maybe the olive oil is, we would say, a little lighter oil because it has more polyunsaturated fats than another oil. But again, it comes down to preference. Vegetables and fruits, of course, obviously lots of vegetables. Fruits limit the amount there they're telling us because there's lots of sugar in the fruit. So as we move up, we get into the nuts and the legumes, the peas and beans. We move up into the fish and poultry and eggs. So the serving sizes are shrinking. Dairy and calcium products, 1 to 2 servings. And then we get to the top, the red meat, the butter, the white bread, the pasta, the potatoes. Some of the things that are that we like to eat are near the top. And so what it's showing us is that the foods that are considered more healthy are at the bottom, and the foods that are considered less healthy are at the top. And there's the thing that's wrong with this is that it's so simplistic, and it is designed to, in a way, it presents, potatoes and beef and butter and pasta as bad, as unhealthy for us. And many people have a very negative view of some of the foods at the top of the pyramid, but the magic word here is moderation. And it's not magic. There's no such thing as magic, but the word is moderation. And we can pretty much eat anything we want. We can tell our patients this. We can eat anything we want as long as we eat it in moderation. A balanced diet consists of all of these components. How much white bread do you eat on a daily basis? Well, is that made up by having a salad to go with it? A lot of it has to, what are you eating at the time? And this is what you tell your patients, because one of the best ways to keep your patients healthy is to encourage them to eat, as they say, have a balanced diet. No, not one emphasis on one thing and one thing alone. Years ago there was a Subway commercial. I don't know, some of you may remember Jared advertised. Jared has come to a fairly bad end anyway, but Jared advertised that he lost something like 200 pounds by eating nothing but Subway's vegetarian sub, because he was counting the calories and only the calories. The downside of that was that he was shortchanging himself on his proteins and his fats, and a lot of his carbohydrates that he needed too. Yes, he lost 200 pounds and he kept most of it off. But that type of obsessive diet that he followed was extremely unhealthy. So, the nutrients that we take in, and if you know anything about Jared and Subway, Jared ended up going to prison for being he's either a pedophile or a predator, one or the other. But anyway, so scammed everybody. But that's whole other story. Okay, nutrients. Most of the nutrients that we take in are used as fuel. Most of them are used as fuel. In fact, everything that we eat could be considered a fuel, because we break down carbohydrates into glucose, and we use that we oxidize the glucose and we release energy from them, and we can use that energy to form ATP, which is how we transfer energy around the bodies. We can do the same thing with the lipids and the proteins. They can be converted also to glucose when we need it. So in a sense, everything could become fuel. Now, the food that we eat, we measure the available energy in that food in the form of calories. Now, the energy in food, in our nutrients, is coming from the valence electrons in the covalent bonds of the molecules making up the food. So if you're eating a potato, and the center of the potato, of course, is mostly starch, which is a polysaccharide. That starch is broken down to glucose. Now, the polysaccharide starch is made of millions of glucose molecules linked together. The glucose molecule has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. And around each one of those, we have our electrons spinning and holding, the carbons to the carbons and the carbons to the hydrogens and the oxygens to the carbons. Those are all covalent bonds, and the valence bonds are the ones in the outermost shell, and they have the valence bond has the greatest potential energy. So we've been able to, we know the amount of available energy in food based on based on the potential energy in the valence shells. And it is, it's been determined, it's been not calculated, but it's been observed through technical means. We measure the energy in different food items by the amount of calories that they contain. And when you see 180 calories on a Snickers bar, or 140 calories on a Nutri-Grain bar, or when you read that an apple has 60 calories, or Burger King's got something that they're advertising that it's 1,200 calories. Okay. Or you like to go to Starbucks and you get one of their lattes, one of their large lattes. I haven't been to Starbucks in a long time, so I forget which one is the grande or whatever, the venti or the grande, whichever one of those is the biggest one. But there are some of those drinks that approach 1,400 calories in one drink. So now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, calories are not evil. Calories are not evil. Calories are not good. Calories are just a measure of available energy. We associate foods that are high in calories as unhealthy. But that's not always the case. And we associate foods that are low in calories as healthier for us. I mean, if you're hungry and you eat a stalk of celery, then you're going to eat something that's very low in calories. It's also got low in a lot of nutrients too. There isn't a whole lot in a stalk of celery, but the calorie count is low. On the other hand, you eat how about a Snickers bar? And that has 180 calories. The celery stick has 10 calories, and the Snickers bar has 180 calories. Now, are the calories in the Snickers bar evil because there's more of them? There's still energy, not great energy, but there's still energy. We measure the amount of energy in food based on the calories it contains, and the calories is always always a measure of the potential energy in the valence electrons. The technical term for a calorie is the amount of energy necessary to raise the temperature of a kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So that's what a calorie is. And the device that they use to measure this is called a bomb calorimeter, like in a bomb, and you place the food item inside a sample of the food, and then you oxidize it in this closed container, and then the amount of energy coming off of that as it's oxidized down to nothing, into carbon dioxide and water, essentially, and energy, is the calorie content. So it's a very precise value. So if we say an apple is 60 calories and a potato is 60 or 80 calories, and quarter pounder with cheese is about 800 calories. It's simply the sum of all the calories found in all the ingredients there, in the beef and the cheese and the sauce and the bun, and the negligible amount from maybe the lettuce and onions and pickles and whatever else goes on a quarter pounder. So calories are only a measuring unit. There's nothing good or bad about calories. Now, within the three major nutrients, the one that we depend on primarily for energy are the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, we break down to glucose. We take in bread, and we eat bread, or we eat starch in the form of potato or carrots, or beans, or peas, or corn. Those starches are broken down to glucose, and we then oxidize the glucose to release the energy. We get most of our carbs from plants, fruits, apples, bananas, pears, grapes, any kind of fruit that we like to eat, blackberries, blueberries, strawberries. All these contain carbohydrates. They all contain sugars, usually in the form of some form of starch. And we get sugars straight from sugar, the stuff that's on the table in the little white packets, maybe at Weigel's when you get your coffee. We have sugar from sugar cane, cane sugar. Cane, the sugar cane plant grows, is harvested, and the sugar is extracted from the sugar cane. And so it's sold in the store as pure cane sugar. The other big source are sugar beets, and they're harvested and the sugar is extracted, and they're advertised in the store as pure sugar. So when you go to Food City to get a bag of sugar, you have a choice of pure sugar or pure cane sugar. That's the only difference, is their sources. They taste the same, they look the same, they have identical shape. The little granulated sugar crystals look exactly the same. You can't tell the difference. Again, it becomes preference. I don't think there's no cost differential either between cane sugar and beet sugar. So the sugars that we add to our coffee, or into baking, or on our cereal, whatever we use it for, the sugars either are cane sugar or just plain sugar. No difference, essentially. We also get sugar from insects, honey from honeybees. That's a big source of sugar. And of course, we have milk sugar, lactose, found in our dairy products. So most of our sugars come from plants. Some come from animals. We prefer the complex sugars, starches, the things we get from cereal grains like oats and wheat and corn, corn flakes, corn-based cereals, whole wheat-based cereals, and oat cereals like Cheerios. You're getting that's a grain cereal full of starch. Legumes, the peas and beans, if you like beans, if you like peas, if you like carrots and potatoes, anything, if you like beets, anything that's a root vegetable, sweet potatoes, another root vegetable. These are all full of starches. And we like these starches because they give us long-lasting energy release. The polysaccharides take a long time to be broken down to glucose. So we have a constant release of glucose coming from the starches. We start metabolizing the starch when we start the process of digestion. We start metabolizing the starch, and it gradually gets converted to glucose, and we convert that glucose to energy. So we release the energy stored in the glucose. We don't convert it to energy. We release the energy in the glucose, and we do it slowly, relatively slowly over time. So we have a long-lasting release of energy as opposed to something that's released very quickly and we burn through it very quickly. So polysaccharide containing foods containing starches are very good for us. Cellulose is a version of a polysaccharide, but we can't process it. It does give us the fiber. That's what the term roughage comes from. But the fiber, it's the indigestible portion of the plant cell. The covering of the grain, for example. Plants use cellulose to build their cell walls. Their cell wall protects their plasma membrane because they can't regulate water loss very well for whatever reason. So they have this wall around each individual cell made out of cellulose. We don't need that. We have our skin to protect our cells. So we don't need this layer, but we can't process cellulose. We can't go out and start chewing on a tree branch and get any nutrients out of it because of the presence of the cellulose in the tree branch. What we end up with, though, on the polysaccharides we can process is cellulose. Cellulose is our fuel, and that's what we use to make most of our ATP with. We use glucose to make ATP. Glucose makes ATP. We break down the glucose, we release the energy. That energy is captured in an ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate. It's the bond between the second phosphate and the third phosphate. And ATP will go from its ADP version to its ATP version all the time. We force phosphate onto the ADP, we get an ATP. It holds for about 7 seconds, but it can transport energy around for 7 seconds. And we use that for muscle contractions. We use it for nerve impulses. We can't move our muscles at all without ATP. When we run out of ATP, our muscles stop moving. And it takes a while for us to run out of ATP in our cells because, yes, it only lasts 7 seconds, but we have enough stored glucose in our cells to keep some of our cells alive for 8 or 10 hours, even though we're dead. So we use glucose for our source of energy. So everything comes down to glucose, whether so we like to break down the complex sugars, the polysaccharides, to glucose. Because that's what starch is made of, is glucose. We like to get down to the glucose. That's what every cell in our body uses for fuel. And we produce ATP. And of course, the ATP, though, as I said, each ATP molecule will only last for 7 seconds. So we're always making more. We're always making more as long as we have glucose available. And if we have oxygen available, we can make ATP. So how many carbohydrates do we need to take in? Well, the average amount recommended by a nutritionist would be about 150 grams of carbohydrates a day. That's about, the average individual should take in about 150 grams a day if their goal is to maintain their weight and have normal maintenance activities going on in their body. Then 150 grams is acceptable. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is an awful lot of. You'd be surprised how many things you eat on a daily basis. It keeps you at 150 grams. A potato, contains about 20 grams. A bowl of cereal maybe about 14 grams. So it's very easy to stay within that 150 gram range. Most of us are not counting the grams of carbs we eat, but it depends on some days you go over, some days you're way under. If you had a large intake of carbohydrates one day, which is sort of unusual maybe, and the next day maybe you don't. But averaging out to about 150 grams of carbs a day, our normal everyday diet is usually going to take care of that for us. We don't know what the absolute minimum is, but we do know that if we get below 100 grams a day, we may start seeing issues with energy levels. So, but even that is not necessarily a big problem because see, our bodies are designed to deal with lower amounts of carbs. So while we say 150, because the range is 125 to 175, but 150 grams, it seems like it's the magic number. If you're advising your patients that they want to lose weight, the nutrient that is going to cause the greatest weight gain are the carbohydrates. And if they cut their carbohydrate intake from 150 to 75 on a daily basis, which is not a big deprivation on their part, then that's how you lose weight. There's all sorts of gimmicks on weight loss, but weight loss is achieved through reducing food intake and exercise. So it says at 100 grams, below 100 grams, we start having shortages of glucose, but our bodies have a way of compensating for that. If we get down to 50 grams, we start breaking down fats and proteins. And that's a good thing because we will convert the stored fats and ultimately stored proteins, which is probably not as good, but we will start breaking down fats. If we are below the level we need of carbohydrates, we will go after the fats. And there's a term called gluconeogenesis. Now, gluconeogenesis means creation. Genesis is creation, neo is new. Creation of new glucose from the stored fats. So you're not getting the amount of glucose that you need for your cells because you're not taking enough glucose in, but you're not going to become glucose deprived because your body will start metabolizing the fat. And that's as it metabolizes the fat and converts the lipids, the triglycerides, to glucose. That glucose is used for energy. And that's the driver behind weight loss. That's all it is. It's very, very simple. And you advise your patients that if they cut back into carbohydrates, then they're going to see weight loss. It's a very simple process because the lipids that are stored in our bodies have a very intertwined relationship with the carbohydrates. If we eat excessive amounts of carbohydrates, our bodies can only process so much carbohydrate. We bring glucose into the cells, and the cells use that for energy. And what they don't use, they store in the form of glycogen. What isn't stored in the cell as glycogen is stored in the liver as glycogen, and what isn't stored in the liver is stored in adipose tissue, and the excess glucose enters into the adipose tissue and is converted to fat. So a person that, when a person consumes high levels of carbohydrates, the carbs are not all burned, they're not all stored as glycogen, they're not, they are stored and end up being stored in the adipose cells as a lipid. So, problem for a lot of people, a lot of your patients are going to be having weight issues because the average American takes in about 300 grams of carbs on a daily basis. That's 300 grams. That's twice what we should be taking in. 100 grams is the minimum. At 50 grams, we start seeing a breakdown of fats to convert the fats to glucose, but the average American's taking in about 300 grams or more a day. Now, how does that relate to food energy? Well, the average human burns about 2,000 calories a day. 2,000 calories of energy is released through the breakdown of glucose. We make ATP. That's what we spend on a daily basis to power our bodies. A person who is maintaining their weight without doing anything special is taking in 2,000 calories. So the standard number of how many calories a day should a person consume is set at about 2,000 calories. You look at a food label, and it gives you the calories on there, and it says, based on a 2,000 calorie day intake and a 2,000 calorie a day burn. So we burn 2,000 calories, we take in 2,000 calories, and we're have a zero net gain. The amount of calories in a gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories. So 4 calories per gram. 300 grams would be a food intake of 1,200 calories. It's over half of the energy balance that you need to run on for the day. That's assuming that the proteins and fat levels are going to stay lower to keep that balanced out. So a person that consumes 300 grams of carbohydrates, there's 1,200 calories of energy right there that have to be processed one way or another. If it's 100 grams, then we're only bringing in 400 calories. So if it's 50, we're only bringing in 200 calories. So 150 is about 300 calories of energy coming in that we can use. So, the problem is that many Americans, many people around the world are consuming carbohydrates at a faster rate, at a higher rate. Why? Well, for one thing, carbohydrates are the least expensive of all food sources. So they're the least expensive, and carbs taste good. We like carbs. We like our cereals. We like our pasta. Most people really like macaroni and cheese or spaghetti or stuff like that. We like our sugars. We like our sugary snacks. Who does? You go into Walmart. You have the aisles are packed with all the Halloween candy. Every one of those little Hershey miniatures or Snickers miniatures or whatever are packed with a certain number of calories. So we like them. The trick to buying Halloween candy, of course, is to buy the stuff that you don't like. Otherwise, you'll end up eating your favorites, before you ever give it out. So anyway, collectively as a nation, we take in too many carbohydrates. We see that in the South. All across the Southeast, we have a real problem with obesity. Tennessee is no exception, because we overindulge on our carbohydrates. The complex carbohydrates, the things we should be eating, the breads, the cereals, the crackers, flour, pasta, we love pasta, the nuts, the rice, and potatoes. These complex carbohydrates take time to break down. They don't release their covalent bond energy immediately. You have to convert them from starch to glucose. Individuals that run a marathon will often load up on pasta, carbohydrate loading, for example. They'll load up on pasta prior to their marathon. And because the release of energy of the pasta, which is starch, will take time, and that will give them long duration energy to, during their run. Unless you're, Olympic class or world class, it's and you can get it done under 3 hours or 2.5 hours. You're going to be running for, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours to complete that 26-mile marathon. Marathoners will frequently load up on complex carbs because it takes time to break down, and that's good. The longer it takes to break down, the longer they're going to have energy release, and so it'll be a constant thing because they don't want to deplete the energy stored in their muscle cells, because then because it is entirely possible to reach the point where they have very little energy available. Now, when you're eating these complex carbs, as a nice side benefit, you're usually picking up vitamins and minerals too. If you eat a baked potato, for example, you get the starches, but you also get vitamins in the skin, vitamins in the starch, minerals in here, probably vitamin C in the potato, rice and pasta. All these are going to have the added benefit of these vitamins and minerals. Nothing is produced in a vacuum where it's only starch. It's going to have other nutrients added in there too. So the complex carbs are good. The simple carbs are not so good. The problem with the simple carb is that they are referred to as empty calories. The simple carbs we burn through very quickly. Yes, they're carbohydrates. Yes, they're going to release energy. We know that because we have a calorie label on them that tells you how many calories. A bottle of Coke has 220 calories in it, depending on the size, I guess. Or a Snickers bar has 180 calories. Or a cereal bar has 140 calories. Now, there's more complex carbs there. But the simple carbs are the foods that are high in sucrose, fructose, other milk sugars in here. These are the things that are going to be processed and contain additives in there. And the additives are probably many of the food additives are not going to give us any kind of nutritional value to it. So you have a bottle of Coke. The bottle of Coke says 220 calories on there. The sugar comes from high fructose corn syrup. Unless you have one of the retro bottles like Pepsi that says pure cane sugar as the sweetening agent, it's most soft drinks, Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, name your favorite. They're gonna, unless they're sugar-free, they're going to be using high fructose corn syrup. Corn syrup, like pancake syrup. The high fructose is a 6-carbon sugar, very similar to glucose. It's a monosaccharide. We can break that down and release lots of energy very quickly. But when we burn through that very quickly. We don't get a lot of benefit, long-term benefit from drinking a Coke. We might get a sugar rush, a little bit of a sugar rush, and then the saying is we get a sugar rush, then we have a crash because we don't have sustained release. There isn't enough sugar. We release all that sugar at one time, and we don't get any long duration benefit from it. Fruit is the same way. Now you would think, well, this can't be. This has to be good because it's fruit. I'm eating an apple. I'm eating a banana. Yes, but as fruit ripens, when fruit becomes overly ripe, in the ripening process, these starches are breaking down and becoming sucroses and even glucoses. The fruit gets sweeter as it ages because it's breaking down, and there's that magic point between where the fruit has gotten soft and mushy and it's very sweet, and do you want to eat it or just pitch it because it's too ugly looking? Who likes to eat a mushy apple? Well, mushy apples are very sweet, but they're not what we expect in an apple. A banana, when a banana ripens, it gets brown spots on its skin, on its peel. And there's two whole schools of thought about bananas. Some people like to eat bananas, when the peel is bright yellow, and others wait till lots of brown spots are on there. The banana inside the brown spot one is all mushy, and it's very sweet. The one that is yellow almost to the point of green is very firm, almost like almost as sometimes like a carrot almost. The point is that the one that is underripe has more starches in it than the one that is overripe, one with the brown spots on it, because it's sweeter. It's turning into the starches are breaking down and turning into sucrose and glucose. That's the one that you use if you're going to make banana bread. You take the mushy older banana because it's sweeter. Fruit, just because it's fruit doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you long duration energy release. Ice cream and puddings, again, also contain high levels of the disaccharides in there. Immature vegetables, never thought about this one, but if you like Chinese food and you've ever had Chinese food and had the little tiny ears of corn in there, those are the immature vegetables. They're full of, since they haven't matured, they contain high levels of the simple carbs. And of course, candy is full of simple carbs too. Most processed foods that are highly processed contain very little complex carbs. Consider pudding, for example. Who doesn't like pudding? Well, you can have pudding that you have to cook. You have pudding that the instant pudding you just mix up with milk, and you have the pudding that you find on the shelf in the packs. You just pop the top of it, a pudding cup, and it's puddings, vanilla, chocolate, or whatever. That pudding has lots of chemicals in there to keep it stable on the shelf, the shelf life, and to keep it from spoilage. So you're not just getting lots of sugar in that, you're getting a lot of chemicals too. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No, I mean, your patient's likely not going to sit down and get their 2,000 calories a day from eating 60 pudding cups. Maybe they will, I don't know. The problem with the simple sugars, the empty calories, is they don't have any long duration benefit for energy release. They release their energy very quickly. When you're hungry in the morning and you have a cup of coffee and a donut, for example, you feel good for a little while. It satisfies your hunger. You get a sugar. You break down the donut into its carbohydrate quickly, and you release a lot of energy from it, and you feel better for a short while. But a breakfast made of starchy, more complex foods, cereal, oatmeal, hotcakes, are going to give you a longer lasting benefit. If we have a diet that is high in simple sugars, we tend to have a lot of nutritional issues. The simplest one is likely to be tooth decay, because the simple sugars become a food source for the bacteria that live in our teeth, which causes cavities. And that's a big health issue across the Southeast. Then also is the more sugars we take in, the more carbs we take in, we have significant weight gain. And that becomes another health issue. Obesity is a worldwide problem, particularly in the US, and it seems like across the Southeast, and also in particular. obesity leads to heart disease. It leads to diabetes. It leads to hypertension, high blood pressure. And we have many, many people in the state of Tennessee and across the U.S., and particularly across, again, the Southeast. When we get into AP2, I'll show you the data that shows that we are in the obesity belt, the diabetes belt, the heart disease belt, and the hypertension belt, all running across the southeast portion of the U.S. So we, a lot of it has to do with the diet that people that live in this area maintain. It's an unhealthier diet. Because there's nothing wrong with any of these food items. There's nothing wrong with a Coke or a Pepsi or a Snickers bar or a banana, either brown or yellow, or ice cream or pudding or Chinese food or any of this stuff. There's nothing wrong with any of this stuff in moderation. That's the key. Nobody's telling your patients that they can't eat this stuff, eat their favorite foods. Just how often do they do and how much of it do they eat? That's the key. If some is good, more is not necessarily better. Okay, enough of the carbohydrates. Let's talk about fats. People focus on fat content in their food. The food industry went through a real revolution about 20 or 30 years ago, and they wanted to have low-calorie foods. So they took the fat out. Well, they should have been focusing more on the carbohydrates. But fats are important. Fats are an important component of our diet. And an individual who comes into your office, when you're a health practitioner of some sort, and says, I'm never going to eat fats again because all fats are unhealthy, all fats are evil. No, they're not. We need fats. The fats that we take in are the neutral fats, the triglycerides, found in solid form or found in liquid form, as like butter or cooking oil. The triglycerides are what we look at. Remember what a triglyceride is. You remember this from chemistry. That was only just 1 unit ago. It's a glycerol alcohol attached to 3 fatty acid molecules, 3 fatty acid chains. In this case, one of the chains has a double bond here, so this is an unsaturated fatty acid. Unsaturated, remember that means it doesn't have all the hydrogen spaces filled up. So this is an unsaturated fat, okay, because of the presence of the double bond. We consume saturated fats and we consume unsaturated fats all day long when we eat things. Depending on what we eat, you go to Burger King, you go to Whopper, you're going to get saturated fats and you're going to get unsaturated fats in the mix. Every food item on its label tells you its content of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. It will tell you the number of the percent of saturated fats. It will tell you the percentage in grams of unsaturated fats. It will break down the unsaturated fats into mono unsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. So you'll see both. You'll see all the results. You may even see trans fats listed. Trans fats is usually going to be 0. We need fats in our bodies. And when I say fats, I'm talking the neutral fats, the triglycerides. The only way we can get certain vitamins into our cells is because they're fat soluble. Vitamin E, for example, vitamin A is fat soluble. Those vitamins absolutely essential, to us. They are fat soluble. They come into the cell, dissolved in the neutral fat. The liver cells and in our skeletal muscle, we use fat as a source of energy. Consider when you look at beef or pork at the meat counter at Food City, you see the fat has been trimmed off, but the fat is there. That is the source of that. These skeletal muscle cells will draw on that fat to break it down to glucose to get energy. It's what our bodies do. It's what our skeletal muscle does. Phospholipids make up our cell membranes. Phospholipids also form something called a myelin sheath. A myelin sheath is a layer of insulation around our axons. The axon is the extension of a nerve cell. The axon is what the nerve uses to send a nerve impulse to another nerve. And some of these axons are very, very long. That big nerve coming out of your hip, the sciatic nerve that goes all the way down to your great toe, that axon is 3 or 4 feet in length, and it is covered by myelin. Myelin, a phospholipid, is the insulator. The insulator allows the nerve impulse to travel at 300 miles an hour. It's only going 3 feet, but it's going at 300 miles an hour because this insulated axon sends nerve signals faster. Without the insulation, we send things at a paltry 100 miles an hour. So, but we can't tell the difference because 300 miles an hour to go 3 feet versus 100 miles an hour to go 1/8 of an inch. To us, it's instantaneous. But we use the myelin as our insulator. Insulated wires, in electrical wiring, insulated wires work better than uninsulated wires. We also need cholesterol. Cholesterol falls in the category of a fat. Cholesterol is a steroid. It is a multi-ringed structure. We use it for reinforcing the cell membrane. We use it to produce the steroid hormones. That includes estrogen, the female sex hormone, testosterone, the male sex hormone, as well as hormones from the adrenal gland that regulate blood pressure and water volume, that regulate glucose levels in the body, because it isn't all just insulin, and also produce an androgynous sex hormone from that is thought to be the trigger for puberty. We'll talk all about that in AP2. So how much fat should we take in? 30% of our diet should be fat. 30% should be fat. Now, 2,000 calorie day, a 2,000 calorie day diet, 30% of that is 600 calories. Now, a gram of fat releases 10 calories of energy. It's more than twice what a gram of carbohydrate does. So a gram of fat gives you 10 calories. So let's see, 30% of 2,000 is 600. So 60 grams of fat on a daily basis would give us our 600 calories, if I did the math right. So 30% of our diet on a daily basis should be fat. Typical diet in the US is greater than 40% fat. Now, what about saturated fats? Well, saturated fats, try to keep those below 10%. Animal fats, how much butter, how much cream, how much lard are you taking in on a daily basis? And that comes down to, how much butter do you actually eat on a daily basis? Probably not very much. Or how much lard do you consume on a daily basis? Well, unless you're eating homemade biscuits every day and you're eating 2 or 3 biscuits at a sitting, probably not a lot. Saturated fats have their place in our diet. You know, like if with butter, if you're eating butter, you know, butter is a saturated fat. It's an animal fat. Animal fats are solid at room temperature because they're saturated. The trade-off with butter is you're getting a saturated fat, but you're not getting all the chemicals that you get in margarine. To get margarine to taste like butter, it has to have flavor additives, it has to have coloring agents, it has to have a lot of salt added to it, whereas butter doesn't need any of those. So the trade-off is, do you get the higher level of saturated fat, or do you have to get all the extra chemicals and the salt? There's a lot of salt added to synthetic butter, to margarine, for flavoring. So what's the trade-off? Anyway, saturated fats, no more than 10%. That's about 100 calories a day in here. Cholesterol. Now there is something that has gone back and forth, and your patients will argue with you about cholesterol. Some people will swear that cholesterol is, you know, a product of Satan. It's evil. Well, no, it's not. And we have to have a certain amount of cholesterol in our diet every day. We have to have, you know, 300 milligrams. Now, what's that? How, like, I can't have any more cholesterol today. I already had 200 milligrams. You know, an egg yolk, the yellow of an egg is about 300 milligrams of cholesterol. You know, so, you know, an egg a day. You know, it used to be, you're back about, you know, well, you're back about 20 years. Well, actually, no, it sort of comes and goes. Eggs are good, eggs are bad. Eggs are good, eggs are bad. It goes back and forth over time. Different studies come out, and depending on, you know, was the study attempting to prove something or disprove something? Did it already have its decision made before the study was run? That's always a problem in research, is trying to keep an open mind and follow which way and follow the data. About 70 years ago, the standard breakfast fare in the US was bacon and eggs. Couple eggs, couple strips of bacon, toast and coffee, or toast and juice. That was the standard breakfast for most Americans, followed by a relatively fat-loaded lunch, you know, a burger, a large sandwich, whatever, fries, you know, and dinner was usually some sort of meat and potatoes variety. And we had a fairly, you know, significant rate of deaths from heart disease 70 years ago. The number of people dying from heart disease 70 years ago was matched by the number of people dying from cancer. And so the diet of the average American was considered the source of all this, because all of those foods combined release a lot of fat into the body. So the assessment was, well, the eggs must be evil. The eggs must be bad for us because of the cholesterol. And, you know, the bacon must be contributing a lot of fat to the diet along with everything else. And there's a lot of validity in that. However, you know, individually, the components were not, you know, that bad. Now, there was a time frame where, you know, all eggs were considered evil. You know, nobody eats eggs because they're full of cholesterol. And then it came out, then it changed. Well, an egg's okay. And then we go to an egg a day, an egg and a half day. I think you get a half an egg, or you go to a half an egg. But generally, you know, an egg a day maybe is fine. You know, it all, again, it comes down to that word, moderation. How many eggs do you eat on a daily basis? You know, in all sources, you know, places you probably can't count, but there were eggs involved there. So it comes down to how many eggs, and how much cholesterol is a person picking up in their diet. Because cholesterol is going to contribute, high levels of cholesterol will contribute to cardiovascular disease. This is why we pay attention to cholesterol. Cholesterol you know, it has its role. We have to make hormones. We have to reinforce the membrane of the cells. We have to have a certain amount of cholesterol. A person that doesn't want to eat any cholesterol in their diet is doing a disservice. Our bodies will find ways to make that cholesterol anyway, but we need that cholesterol. But cholesterol will help, you know, cholesterol can help or hinder our cardiovascular system. High levels of fat and high levels of cholesterol will actually contribute to damage to the cardiovascular system. This is why we don't like to see people eating a lot of saturated fats. Now, let me explain more about why here. Okay, the fats, well, you know, animal fats in particular tend to be saturated. You know, they are the ones with all the hydrogen bonds filled up. Saturated fats tend to produce more what we call the bad cholesterol, the LDLs, the low density lipoproteins. And those are used to transport excess cholesterol and excess fats to the cells, including the cells that line our blood vessels. And that causes the accumulation of plaque. Now, where do all these sources of animal fat come from? As I said, it's mostly saturated fats. It's mostly animal fats. Lard. You know, lard is nothing but rendered animal fat. It's cooked up and it's converted to, you know, we cook out the impurities, collect all the oils and collect all the fats from slaughterhouses and stuff like that, or the trimmings of fat at meat counters, and it is rendered and converted to this shortening type substance called lard, which is an excellent shortening used in baking, used in pastries and pie crusts and biscuits, any type of pastry shell that or pastry device that we want it to be that is light, you know, and flaky. Because lard, when it breaks down during the cooking process, lard is mixed in with the dough, and in the cooking process, the lard will melt essentially, and the molecules will break apart and release carbon dioxide and water. And the carbon dioxide gases force the layers of the dough around the lard into very, very thin layers. And it makes the pastry shell or pastry or pie crust or whatever very light and very flaky. Without lard, a biscuit turns into a hockey puck. Now, shortening, vegetable shortening does the same thing. Vegetable shortening works the very same way a can of Crisco will do the same thing that a can of lard does. The calorie content difference between a tablespoon of Crisco and a tablespoon of lard is only about 20 calories greater for the lard. There is cholesterol in the lard. No, there's usually no cholesterol in Crisco. The primary difference in the Crisco versus lard is that Crisco has a high salt content for flavor. So, but if you compare an equivalent sample of lard versus Crisco, there's not a whole lot of difference. So, not going one way or the other, but most of your bakers and pastry chefs will prefer to use lard because it gives you a better product. Now, it goes back again, if you eat lard, how much lard do you eat? Lard also may be the basis of frying oils in a lot of restaurants, to fry with. It has a higher melting point. It has one of the advantages of lard is that it can cook at a higher temperature in a fryer. So that makes a big difference there too. So where do we get lard? Again, it's rendered animal fat. It's animal fat that's cooked down. We get fat, that fat came from meat. Meat is often trimmed when we get it, but in its untrimmed version, it has layers of fat embedded in among the muscle cells. There is fat on chickens, poultry, dripped under the skin. We have cholesterol in the yolk of the egg, nothing in the white. The white is albumin. We have fat in milk and milk products. Milk from a cow contains, has butterfat. Butterfat is what separate, when we drink milk now, we drink whole milk. It's been homogenized. The fat has been broken up into tiny particles within the milk, so we can't see it. But fresh milk from a cow, if allowed to sit, the cream, the butterfat will move to the top of the milk. As you said, the cream rises to the top. Well, that's where the phrase comes from. So the cream will separate from the rest of the milk. It's because of its higher fat content. When you buy milk at the store, you're buying whole milk. It's homogenized. The fat and the milk itself have been mixed together. They don't separate. Now, whole milk has a butterfat content of 4%. That's all, 4% butterfat. If you go to 2%, that means it's only 2% butterfat, 1% is 1% butterfat, and skim milk has no butterfat. But the fat savings in here from going from whole milk to skim milk is only a 4% savings in fat. So it's not a lot of difference between skim milk and whole milk. So, and any of the dairy products are going to will likely have a certain butterfat content. Ice cream, for example. Ice cream is sold as ice cream and premium ice cream. Premium ice cream is not an advertising gimmick. Whether it's premium Kroger's or Walmart's or Food City or Publix, premium ice cream is based on the butterfat content. Premium ice cream has a higher butterfat content than regular ice cream, and it tastes better. Doesn't matter what brand it is, it tastes better because the butterfat in there allows, what fat does to our foods is allows the food particle to slide easier around the inside of our mouth, coming into contact with more of our taste buds. The food is smoother, creamier, it has better texture, it has better flavor. That's what butterfat does to ice cream. So when you see premium, Walmart's premium ice cream, it's likely, I've never tried it, but it's likely pretty good ice cream. I've tried Kroger's premium, and I think it's very good. The premium ice cream is this is the kind of ice cream, the high butterfat ice cream is what you get at Baskin Robbins or at Marble Slab. You're getting a premium ice cream in here. The higher the butterfat, the better the ice cream is going to taste. Now, fats also come from plants. Chocolate, unfortunately, has a high fat content. So do and we also use fats from the various cooking oils: corn, soybean, cottonseed, olive oil, coconut oil. Coconut oil and coconut itself has a significant fat content. There is fat in corn. There is fat in seeds, and in nuts. Peanuts and all other nuts are fairly high in fat. Now, granted, these are all going to be unsaturated fats. So these are all automatically healthier fats for us than the animal fats because they're unsaturated. Animal fats are saturated. The plant fats are initially unsaturated. So the plant fats, are healthier in the sense, but you can, someone can overindulge. Just because peanuts are unsaturated fats doesn't, you know, you still have to, there's still a limit to how much, what is a healthy level of fat and what's an unhealthy level of fat in diet. The same with corn or chocolate, uh, plant sources of fats are usually healthier for us than the animal sources, but the fats that come from animal sources are still considered healthy in moderation. Cholesterol, where do we get cholesterol? We get it from eggs. That's the most common source of cholesterol. But if you like to eat organs like liver or kidneys, lots of people like to eat chicken livers, fried chicken livers. That's a high source of cholesterol there. People that eat beef liver, you know, you know, if you were forced to eat liver as a child, you were picking up a lot of cholesterol from that unwittingly, because it's where the cholesterol, a lot of the cholesterol is stored in our bodies, in our liver. Kidney. Some people like to eat kidneys and brains. Some people like to eat brains, animal brains. Fried brains and eggs is a I don't want to say it's a popular breakfast food, but there are people that will eat brains and eggs. Meat, of course, part of the contribution to heart disease 70 years ago was the bacon and egg breakfast, and it's probably more harm from the bacon than from, as far as cholesterol loading from coming from the bacon than from the eggs. Fish eggs. I don't know, many of us eat fish eggs, but caviar, never had it, but it's high in cholesterol. Seafood, certain types of seafood. If you like shrimp, if you like crab, if you like lobster, and who doesn't? I'm sure somebody doesn't, but most people like those foods. They're relatively high in cholesterol. Does that mean you should never eat them? No, of course not. It means that you eat them in moderation. Well, I'm tired of hearing me say that. So, cholesterol from, again, the average amount of cholesterol on a daily basis is fine. It's the overabundance of anything that's going to cause problems. Now, last point here, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier. Cholesterol and the triglycerides are both components of our diet. When we eat fat doesn't break down easily. The fat molecules resist being broken down, and so the digestion of fats really takes place in our small intestine. The first 10 inches of our small intestine is called a duodenum, and we have a duct there coming from our gallbladder, and that duct releases a substance known as bile. Now, bile is made in our liver. Bile contains salts that chop up the fat into small pieces, and the small pieces then are absorbed through the small intestine wall. Go through the wall, through the simple columnar cells, into a specialized circulatory system called the lymphatic system. Then the small pieces of fat are then taken back to the plasma. So we pick up our cholesterol and our triglycerides there, and we also pick up what are known as the high density lipoproteins. In other words, the HDLs. We remember what we call the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. The good cholesterol is what we call the HDLs, because their role is to bring excess fat and excess cholesterol back from the cells to the liver. And so their role is to keep prevent an accumulation of fat and fatty deposits around our cells and around our blood vessels. And that's why it's important. Okay, I'm going to have to stop here. And well, I'm glad you got the sound fixed. Good. So, okay. This is, I think we're starting to get into areas that actually make sense to us now, because we're getting into areas that deal with the human body. And, one of the key things to remember about nutrition is if some is good, more is not necessarily better. We have to and I preach the word moderation, because that's what you're going to preach to your patients, is that moderation is essential in here. So anyway, I'm going to get us out of here. Lab this afternoon, if it works, we'll have a review of, there's some videos that are nice reviews of the bones, and you can get to these videos in eLearn, and each one lasts about 10 minutes, and you can, like one for the skull, one for the axial skeleton, one for the appendicular skeleton. Sit down with your PowerPoints and watch the thing, or look at the models. The models are available if you're on Sevierville, they're available in room 217. Just check in with campus police at Maples Marshall, and they'll let you in. The building will be open next week during fall break on Monday and Tuesday. We don't have class on Monday next week. And if you are, so there are no classes on Monday and Tuesday, but the buildings will be open. So no lecture on Monday. Okay, I'm going to get us out of here, and I'll see you all after break.